just throw your hand up. My goal is to try to give some of you an opportunity to catch up on some sleep, right? Some of you are tired, and so just have that elbow, Patrick, going. You guys can keep each other awake there. But I have this great voice that puts people to sleep. And Autumn says that when she struggles with insomnia on campus, she just puts on one of my messages and it knocks her right out. So that's excellent. But let's take a look at the beginning or the origin of mankind. And he titled it Times Past of Who They Were Created to Be. And so we see here from the beginning of time, people have been questioning the reason for their existence. Although the first man and woman were given explicit direction from the Creator on what their purpose was, we quickly lost sight of that purpose. God created mankind as an instrument of worship to bring him glory by bringing attention to his awesome wonder. So that statement right there, if you want to underline it, there's our topic sentence. This is what man's purpose is. And this is the wide-angle, big picture answer to the question, why am I here, right? That last sentence, let's read it again. God created mankind as an instrument of worship to bring him glory by bringing attention to his awesome wonder. Let's take a look at a couple passages of Scripture. Let's go to Isaiah 43. Isaiah 43. This is a pretty familiar passage. I wonder if you guys might help me do some reading. It's something that we used to do in my other class. We would go around the room and do some reading. Maybe someone could just read verse 1 for me. Go ahead, Art.
But now, thus saith the Lord that created thee, O Jacob, and he that formed thee, O Israel, fear not, for I have redeemed thee, I have called thee by thy name, thou art mine.
So this is very familiar. How about verse 2? Patrick, you want to read that for me?
When thou passest through the waters, I will be with thee. Through the rivers, they shall not overflow thee. When thou walkest through the fire, thou shalt not be burned, neither shall the flame kindle upon thee.
And here's why. Jamie, verse 3?
For I am the Lord thy God, the Holy One of Israel, the Savior. I gave Egypt for thy ransom, Ethiopia and Seba for thee.
So he tells them, there's a couple of things that he begins to tell them he's done for them. But he gives one of the best introductions, I think, to any passage of Scripture. He just says, I've redeemed thee, I've called thee by name, you're mine. You belong to me. This should bring any believer relief. And then he tells them, I know you're going to go through some tough times. Verse 2, when you pass through the water, I'm right there with you. Go through the river, they won't overflow. When you walk through the fire, you won't be burned, neither shall the flame kindle upon thee. This was specific for Hananiah, Azariah, and Mishael, right? Otherwise known as Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. And so they lived that out. And he tells them why. I am Jehovah. Capital L, capital O, capital R, capital D. Thy God, the Holy One of Israel, thy Savior. And then he begins to tell them over the next few chapters what he did for them. But let's skip down. Stan, would you read verse 7 for us?
Even every one that is called by my name, for I have created him for my glory, I have formed him, yea, I have made him.
So he basically says, bring your sons, bring your daughters, all the children, all of my children, I've created them for my glory. He gives here the purpose for his people. And not only for specifically his people, but I think this is one of the Old Testament promises that we can kind of put ourselves right there in. I think this is one where the church should have no problem. We learned very specifically from Pastor in our Monday night Bible Institute class, right, that the church is one of the mysteries. It's not mentioned in the Old Testament. But this is basically every one of God's children who he has created, he created for this purpose. So you and I definitely fall into this category. This is one where we definitely would fall in. So we have been created for God's glory. God formed us, God made us. And so this is very specific here. God created mankind as an instrument of worship to bring him glory by bringing attention to his awesome wonder. Let's see this in the New Testament. Let's go to 2 Corinthians chapter 5. 2 Corinthians chapter 5. Paul specifically is talking about the Christian life, and I want us to read verses 14 and 15. Who wants to help me out with this one? 14 and 15. So Hannah wants to read verse 14, and Jennifer wants to read verse 15. So.
For the love of Christ constraineth us, because he was judged that if one died for all, then were all dead.
And that he died for all, that they which live should not henceforth live unto themselves, but unto him which died for them and rose again.
So Paul very specifically lets us know we've been bought, we've been purchased. And this life that I have, it's not mine. This life that I have belongs to another. It's the love of Christ constraineth us. The word there for constraineth is to compel, to compress, to be held together. So this is something that's attached to us. Think of that briefcase that's handcuffed to the security guard, right? It's with him. It's with him everywhere. And so the love of God basically attaches us to him. We saw on Sunday that nothing can separate us from the love of God. Nothing can separate the believer from God's love. But there's something that comes along with that. The love that keeps us constrained and connected to God basically tells us the life that I have should not be lived to myself. The life that I have should be lived to Christ. They which live should not henceforth live unto themselves, but unto him which died for them and rose again. That was the payment that connected us to him. That was that's what made us precious. That's what made us a purchased possession. This giving of Christ's life and his resurrection from the dead is what connected us to him. And so that's what basically tells us that the life that we live belongs to another. So that's the good news. But we have a problem in this world, right? Let's pick it up at the second paragraph. Mankind was never intended to self-serve or even build themselves the life that would be desired by the American dream or climbing the corporate ladder. Instead, they were given the responsibility to have a relationship with God and learn how he desires to be worshiped. And the testimony were to carry the world of his character, his attributes, and his abilities. We built a life that distracts us with things that bring us pleasure and find our purpose in what we can make for ourselves. We need to return our focus to what God has created us to do, worship him. And in order to do this, we need to know who we are as mankind. Who we are is the identifier for how we are to live out a life that reflects the true identity we bear. So I was thinking about this yesterday, actually, and I was trying to think about how to kind of drive home this idea of something that has a purpose, something that is dedicated, right? Who's ever sent lunch money with their kids? You guys ever sent your kids out the door and said, this is for this purpose, right? Do you get an accounting of it on the back end? Sometimes do you find out whoever gets change? Kids don't get, you get change?
Yeah, I do.
How about that? Now that's impressive. I think you're going to have to share with us how you get change. So there's an accounting there, right? But sometimes the money just goes, and if your kid doesn't complain, if he doesn't come home hungry, then he's okay, right? Well, I saw a video recently of a mom who her little boy kept coming home hungry every day. And she packed all kinds of food in his lunchbox. He's coming home hungry every day. So she's like, is he getting bullied at school? Is he losing it? What's he doing? And so she followed him. He lived right beside the school. So she kind of followed him. and she took a video on her phone, and he was feeding stray dogs on his way to school. There were these two skinny dogs that he passed every day on the way to school, and he opened up his lunchbox, and he was just giving it, and these dogs were like, and it was gone. But it made this kid happy. And so she asked him, she said, "Why are you doing that?" And he just said, "Well, I have a mom who gives me food. Those doggies didn't have any mom to give them any food, so he was taking care of them." But I was thinking about this idea of sending someone away with lunch money, all right? You stick that money in their pocket and they go. Well, that's money that should be used for a very specific purpose, right? They shouldn't be wasting that. They shouldn't come home hungry and have some new toy that they bought, right? They shouldn't come home with baseball cards or someone else's backpack. "Where'd you get that new backpack?" "Well, I used my lunch money and I bought this." That money is for a very specific purpose, right? But I want you to think about who's ever experienced this idea of found money. You ever been out and you stick your hand in your jeans and you pull out a $20 bill or a $10 bill and you're like, "Oh, yes." And you're like, okay, this does not have a specific purpose. There's no accountability for this. So the reason I wanted to bring this up is that gets us into our first theory, right? This idea that mankind happened by accident. Mankind is like found money in the pocket, right? There's no designer. Man is created, but he just happened to be by evolution. Now, why do you think that's such a popular theory? Why do you think evolution is so widespread, this idea that we came from nothing? So let's explore that a little bit. So let's dive deeper into that. What does that mean, no accountability?
There's no morality, there's no right or wrong, it's all subjective.
So there's no rules that I have to abide by, right? So how does that make me feel if I truly believe that I was here by accident? My guilt and shame, I don't have to deal with that anymore, right? I don't have to worry about what to do with the time that I've been given. It's not like somebody's lunch money where I'm going to have to go back and tell Mom, "No, I bought lunch. I made sure and got a drink. I made sure and got, I just didn't buy junk food out of the vending machine. I bought a hot lunch. It was broccoli day, so I ate my broccoli," right? If there's no accountability, it's like you just found that $20 bill in your pocket. You can spend that out on whatever you want. There's right? You don't have to tell anybody what you did with that money that you found in your pocket. You can blow that on Dairy Queen, right? Or you can get some Crystal Burgers on the way home, right? That's the time when it's time to treat yourself. But everything else fits in the budget. I have to make an accounting for everything else. So this idea of evolution, there's no morality. There's no right or wrong. I don't have to feel guilty about my proclivities, right? If I struggle with a sin, if I struggle with an addiction, I can say what? It's not my fault. I was born this way, right? Have you heard that before? It's not a choice. This is just who I am. I think there's trying to find, studies where criminals have a particular gene that makes them, if there's a particular thing in their DNA makeup, what's the whole purpose of that? What's the whole point of that? Exactly. There's their built-in excuse. Well, this guy, we shouldn't punish him. He didn't have a choice. There was, I think what's been the big thing in the news is the guy that killed the Ukrainian girl on the subway. It's just wickedness out there. But again, to hear these talk show hosts say, "Let's not be too hard on this guy. He was mentally ill. He was schizophrenic. He's a murderer. He needs to be put behind bars. He needs to be dealt with. There needs to be justice." And so this idea that there's no designer, that I was not created, that I don't have to give account to anybody frees me to kind of make whatever decision I want to make. I don't have to go to anybody with the time that I've been given and say, here's what I did with my energy, here's what I did with my time, here's the choices that I made. And so this idea of evolution takes away man's purpose and says, hey, do whatever you want. Do whatever you want. So we see here the result of this theory, mankind turns then to self-pleasure. This is the most gratifying purpose that creates the greatest life for themselves in order to stand above other primates. The strongest will fight for themselves and will do anything to build up their own kingdom with no hope for the future after this world. Let's take a look at this from Scripture's viewpoint. Let's go to 2 Peter chapter 2. 2 Peter chapter 2. Peter predicted this. Let's see here. Let's take a look at verses 1 and 2. Dennis, you want to read verse 1?
Sure. But there were false prophets also among the people, and there shall all be false teachers among you, who privily shall bring in damnable heresies, even denying the Lord that all men may bring upon themselves swift destruction.
And Jim, you want to read verse 2?
Many shall follow their
I gave you the tough one. Pernicious.
pernicious ways, by reason of whom the way of truth shall be evil spoken.
So that word pernicious just basically means, it means destructive. Pernicious would be wasteful. And so Peter's talking about a group of false teachers that come in, and I think this is one of the theory of evolution, the theory of non-intelligent design, right? That's an oxymoron, right? In order for something to be designed, it had to come from something intelligent, right? But so this is accident. The Big Bang, chaos created order. Out of nothing comes something, right? And you can see why it doesn't make sense. But this is one of the heresies that has come, and it's even finding its way into the church, right? You've heard of the idea of theistic evolution, that God actually used these non-organized. To say that God does anything non-organized, I think to me is heretical and blasphemous in and of itself. But that God was the one who used this going from simple to complex, which is never found in nature. Never does something that's simple evolve into something that's more complex. It's always the other way around. The theory of energy that we got from Sir Isaac Newton is everything breaks down, right? Chaos is what increases. Entropy increases. It goes from a more complex state. As it breaks down, it goes into a more simple state. And that's what we've been able to observe. But somehow, this heresy, and I wanted to bring to your attention this phrase, denying the Lord that bought them. And I think this is really what's underlying, this is what goes into this theory of evolution. It's at the core of secular humanism. It tries to take God off the throne and put man on the throne in his place. Because if there's not a designer, if there's not a creator, then who's the one who decides what you do with your life? You. Or someone stronger than you who comes in and forces you, right? But still, who's God? Man becomes God. The strongest, right, survive. Survival of the fittest, you've heard that before? These ideas that the strong survive and the winners get to write the history. You've heard those sayings before. But this is the idea that they're denying the Lord that bought them. I'm convinced that there are no true atheists in this world. That down deep, they know They know that they're accountable, that they're going to face somebody one day, but they're too stubborn to admit it. They won't admit it. I'm convinced that that's the case, that these people who claim that there's nothing, you hear stories about an atheist as they approach their deathbed, how things begin to change, right? How that fear comes in, and they know their comeuppance is coming soon. They know that it's coming soon, and they begin to question then their choices. They begin to question their beliefs. And so this idea of denying the Lord that brought them, and their ways are destructive. Their ways are wasteful. And I want us to understand that this theory, all it does is it breaks down kind of the purpose of what we're trying to do. We're trying to go back to basics. We're trying to understand as believers what we're here for. What is our purpose? Because I think it enables us to get to this place where I'm living an empowered Christian life. Remember the breakdown of what we did last Wednesday? Faith leads to knowledge, leads to love, leads to power. This idea of me believing in something that's invisible, me trusting that God's utterances are true, me saying, okay, I think Hannah and I were having a conversation a few weeks ago about these doubts that come in and kind of attack the very basis of what we believe, and we're like, what if it's not true? What if it's not? And that threatens the believer's ultimately effectiveness and spiritual power. Because if I can get someone to doubt their faith, they're not going to have knowledge, they're not going to be able to love, and they're not going to be empowered in their inner man. And so if I can derail it at the beginning and take away someone's faith, if I can undermine their faith, they're not going to be an effective believer. They're not going to be able to live the life that Christ expected them to live. So this is what we're here for. This is why these heresies are destructive, right? All right, so mankind turns to self-pleasure as the most gratifying purpose that creates the greatest life for themselves in order to stand above their other primates. Who's seen an example of that? Go ahead.
I'm sorry, what was?
No, I'll let you give your point first.
So I've never met anyone that actually believes this and lets this theory play out to its logical end and follows it. You know what I'm saying? They say they believe to get rid of accountability, but then in today's age, I can say this here, but if you really believe it's the survival of the fittest, why are you mad at the Europeans? They apparently were more fit than a bunch of the rest of the world, right? Now, again, I don't believe that, but that's the logical conclusion. They're unwilling to come to that.
There's a lot of hypocrisy in that, right?
Or there's this, we pointed out, man has a bent towards more, like there's something moral in us, whether it's right, it's in the right place or not. There's still, like you said, there's that idea. We still somehow know we're going to be accountable. So they're trying to create a morality from this, became from an accident.
And that's why I don't buy it. I'm with you. I don't buy it. When someone says that there is no God, and this is what Charlie Kirk, to bring his name back up, what he was so good at. He would bring the conversation around, and he would turn these arguments inside out on people. And you'd listen to him debate, and he was brilliant at this. But you try to ask somebody, okay, then would you say that murder is wrong? And of course, most atheists would say what?
Yeah.
Of course. And you ask them, why?
What if it promotes the strongest of the species?
And so most of the people who will tell you that they're atheists or believe in evolution, they're hypocrites. So my question was going to be, close to this, where do you see this in society played out the most?
I see it in the homosexual movement. And a lot of homosexuals claim to be evolutionists, but one of the tenets of evolution is evolution removes and designates for extinction those things which do not propagate the species. Explain homosexuality existed in every history of every nation as far as we can go back and have recorded history.
I think that's one of the biggest places where its hypocrisy shows up, because you're not going to survive if you put if you put 50 males and 50 transgender females on an island and come back to that island 100 years from now. There's going to be 100 male skeletons, all right? There's no male and female there, all right? They're all men. They're all biological males. And they're not going to be able to propagate the species because nobody's having a baby on that island, all right? It's not happening. So that's, I think, but to go back, why is the homosexual so quick to admit or to tell you that he doesn't believe that there's a God? Why?
Romans chapter 1. When they knew there was a God, they denied him, professing themselves to be wise and became fools, and the foolish heart was darkened, and they gave themselves over to do reprobate things.
So they abandon the idea of God because it makes them feel as if, oh, you tell me.
This kind of goes back to that murder I've heard, I've talked to people, and they say that morality is based on culture. Because, like, I'm like, okay, well, in my culture, homosexuality is okay, murder is okay. You can't judge me for that. Because they're like, well, culturally, my society does something wrong or right. I was like, well, that's the thing, like, this whole, like, culture thing. And in that case, you can never bring anyone to court. You can never put anyone in prison.
Again, that's the argument. The argument is, if there's no God, then there's no one to tell me that I'm doing wrong. There's no basis for you to tell me I'm doing wrong. So I think in the homosexual movement, that's one of the places where we see this most prevalently.
Well, I think there's also I think they're really just, anything that God says, they're going to do the opposite. And try to survive and say, look, you said if I ate the fruit, I would die. I'm not dead yet, right? I'm doing way more than eating the fruit. And I'm not dead yet.
Yeah, I'm breaking every rule you can bring up.
You hear this word counterculture. You hear that counterculture is somehow it being proud that, I'm counter to whatever the culture is. There's good elements and there's some that are neutral and some that are bad, but it's that idea of rebellion.
Well, you guys remember, most of us in this room, my age or close, right? Some a little younger, some a little older. But you guys remember back in the late 70s or the 80s, when we started seeing homosexuality in media, how was it depicted back then? Autumn, you don't get to answer this question. Sorry, this is not for you.
It was taboo.
It was, but it started showing. You guys remember, I'm going to really date myself here. You guys remember Bosom Buddies? Tom Hanks and what's his name? Michael. No, his name was Michael in the Newhart show, but Peter Scolari, I think is his name. Tom Hanks and Peter Scolari. They wanted to live in an apartment complex that only had women, so they had to pretend to be women. And so they dressed up as women, and it's a comedy, right? So back then, cross-dressing was comedic. It was the comedic relief, right? And you had, going a little bit further, late 80s into the 90s, you started seeing characters pop up that were the throwing the arms, very flaming, right? And it was funny, all right? But then it changed. It kind of got serious, right? Now we have them starting to show up in dramas. Now every Amazing Race or whatever game show, you have to have a same-sex couple, right? And so that ruined one of my favorite shows. We used to watch that every year, but they were just shoving it in your face. And so it went from taboo, something to be hidden, something that you were embarrassed about, then it became something that was laughed at, then it was something that became a joke, then it became something that was serious. And where are we? Just go 10 years ago. gay pride. Now there's a whole month dedicated, right, to, and now you're a bigot, you're filled with hate if you don't support. Now it's not taboo, something you hide, or not something we laugh at, or something that we take seriously and accept. Now you're hateful if you don't support it, if you don't come out and affirm it. And so that's how, in 50 years, society changes. And so they turn it upside down. And how are they able to do that? By removing the truth of God designed families for one man, one woman, nuclear family, the Leave It to Beaver family, right? Mom, dad, sons, with Eddie Haskell to pick on, right, next door. Now it's, and modern family, right? The modern family is, two guys adopting their own kids, right? And they're supposed to be the loving parents, all right? That's what we're doing with now. And so you go from here to here, and how do you get there? By taking away man's purpose, taking away a designer, taking away the one who built the system, all right? If you can somehow get people to believe that there's no designer to the system and no purpose for the system, you can get people to accept anything. And that's what this theory is built to do. And so let's jump now into theory 2. And this will be where we close today. Theory 2, mankind was created from God, formed in His likeness and in His image. They were created with the purpose to glorify God by a life of service and enjoy the life that God has gifted them, all the while looking forward to a better life afterward with hope for the future after this world. So this kind of, okay, I can agree with that. I like that paragraph, right? Everything in there fits what I believe, right? We were created, God formed us, man was originally built in God's likeness, God's image. He was given the purpose. He gets to enjoy this life of service. If I do things God's way, that's the best thing for me. That's the life that I really want to search for, because that's my greatest opportunity to be useful. That's my greatest opportunity to accomplish things that matter for eternity. That's my greatest opportunity to enjoy what I'm doing. Whereas if I'm kind of doing my own thing and it doesn't work out, I got nobody to blame for but myself. And I'm ultimately going to run out of strength and energy because I'm guaranteed to be doing it in the power of my flesh. But if I'm doing what God has called me to do, He's already made a path. He's already made my way clear. He's going to empower me to do those things He's called me to do. And if an obstacle shows up, who can I count on to deal with that obstacle? He's going to lift me right over it. Or He's going to get me through it. All right? It's up to Him, because He's the one who's called me to do this. I've been communicating with the principal at our old school. What would happen, David, if your high school math teacher told you, the one you have teaching Algebra 2, geometry, college algebra, the one who has the connection to your college, that teacher said, I'm getting married and I'm leaving in November. That'd be like, okay, we're in trouble. Because those teachers don't grow on trees. That's not your, okay, I know you're an L.Ed. and you did teach 5th grade, I'm going to put you in 2nd grade, right? Or I'm going to move you from here to here. Sometimes you can take that PE teacher and stick him in a geography classroom, right? Sometimes you can do, who's teaching plain geometry? That high school PE teacher is not teaching geometry, right? So either you hire a teacher or you're going to be teaching it, all right? And so this is what I was talking with his principal. He got that message in August, first week of school, that she signed a contract, basically that I'm engaged, I'm getting married in November over Thanksgiving, and I won't be back. So I'm trying to tell him, whose work is it? Whose school is it? It's God's school. Does God have a job? Does God have something that he wants to accomplish at that school this year? Who's going to provide? God's going to provide. And so we've been on this walk of faith. Well, I think he hired one today. Thank the Lord. Took him about 4 or 5 weeks he had 3 good candidates, and even that for me was amazing. I was like, well, I know this guy who's in Texas, but I don't know if I can talk him into coming back. I was going to try to get your son back in town, or at least closer. But there's no zoo over there for Bailey, so it wouldn't have worked out. But again, that's where our faith had to actually become real. Here's a real life situation where we have to say, whose work is it? Well, again, if we have needs at this church, if we have needs in the nursery, or we have needs in our Sunday school class, and God wants the work to happen, who's going to raise up a laborer? It's going to be God, right? If there's a bill that we have to pay as the church, and God wants it to happen, what can we trust? He's going to provide it, right? So that's me trying to live the Christian life in the way that God intended. There might be some tough sledding, there might be some obstacles, but what can I trust? I can trust that God's got a way around it or a way through it. And I can rest and rely upon him. So this is the theory that gives us comfort. This is the theory that provides, it helps deal with my anxiety, right? It helps deal with the worries and the fear that I have as I approach this struggle that's coming next, all right? So let's take a look at the results of this theory. Mankind lives with a purpose, glorifying God through serving him and enjoying his creations. Serving him by serving others and putting Christ first in all things, loving him with their heart, soul, mind, and strength. Serving others as equal creatures of his image and sacrificing for others in love the way Christ loved all the world by sacrificing his life for their salvation. They look forward to an eternity of fellowship and pleasure through glorifying God in perfected bodies for all eternity. So everything kind of fits, right? Everything fits the way it's supposed to fit here. You have a square peg. Well, it fits in a hole that's specifically designed for that, right? It fits in and it fits perfectly. You have this, I struggle sometimes with buying cheap furniture, buying cheap things, and then you get it. You're trying to follow directions, but you see it's a poor design. Is there anything more frustrating than seeing something that hasn't been designed well? Okay, you're trying to put it together, and you're like, this is supposed to go in here. It doesn't go in there. I didn't do anything wrong, and you got to call, and you call that 1-800 number, and they're like, okay, yeah, you got sent the wrong part. We'll send you a new one. We'll get it. You'll get it right. But there's nothing more frustrating than to be trying to put it together, and you're like, this is the way that was designed, and it's not working out. It's not working out. But on the other hand, you get an appreciation if you've put all the things together that I've put together in my lifetime, and you're like, babe, you got a good one here. This was a joy to put together. It was designed well, it fits, and it doesn't rattle, it doesn't squeak, it's solid, right? You've experienced that part where, okay, the designers knew what they were doing. This works well. When they put roundabouts in Sarasota, I was skeptical at first, all right? But if you get in a good roundabout, and people know what they're doing, it actually works a lot better than a light. You know, you get in, you pop out. It's when that person gets in a roundabout and doesn't know what they're doing that causes the problems. That, when we went to Ireland for a senior trip, it was difficult because I was too cheap to rent an automatic. I rented a stick shift, right? And I rented a stick shift that was on the other side. And so I knew how to drive a stick, but I know how to drive a stick on this side, right? Where this is the clutch and this is the gear shift. So I had to learn to do it backwards on the other side of the road because they drive on the wrong side of the road up there. So I'm trying to you remember what I'm talking about, right? I was trying to pep talk myself into jumping into the roundabout, and I'm like, easy in, easy out. And I stalled of course, in the middle of the roundabout, and everybody's honking their horns at me, and the girls are all laughing at me. I was like hyping myself up. I got this. But I was the one who messed it up. It wasn't the design's fault. It was me that wasn't doing things according to the design. And I became the bottleneck. I became the monkey in the wrench, right? I caused the problem. And so I think when we understand the design, when we understand the plan, everything works well. It doesn't mean it's easy, right? It doesn't mean it's, but it flows. It's smooth, all right? Now, again, it may be tough at times. You may get some resistance, but ultimately God is going to take you through it. God is going to make a way. He's going to give you the strength that you need to do what you have to do. He's going to remove that obstacle at just the right time. He's going to provide the funds for what you need to do. He's going to give you the personnel. But when I don't understand the plan, when I don't understand the design, and I try to do things my own way, and I'm on the wrong side of the road and my car stalls out, I only have myself to blame. And I think that's what's going on in our society. People don't understand what they're designed for. Why do we have such an increase in self-harm? Why do we have such an increase in anxiety? Why do we have such an increase in we have kids that don't understand their own identity anymore? Well, we have a society that has taken away what it means to be truly human. We have a society that is not pursuing what it was designed for. And so, of course, it's going to break down. Of course, it's not going to work. I think you have a populace, you have millions and millions of people across the United States that aren't doing what they were designed to do, and I think their subconscious realizes it. And so their subconscious is pushing back. It's creating dissonance. It's creating interference. Your mind is not working the way it should because you're not doing what you were designed to do. And so we need to make sure as believers that we don't fall into that trap. We need to make sure we understand, hey, I'm not here for myself. All right? I'm here to serve. I'm here to do what God called me to do. I need to find where I fit, right? I need to understand myself, how I was created, body, soul, and spirit, and I need to be able to see, that's where we're going next. We're going to be able to see how we're like God. What's our likeness to God, so that I understand how I fit in, so that I can do what